been almost a month with no power cuts in South Africa. There have been growing calls that Escom needs more private partners to deal with load shedding. On Thursday, SATEC unveiled a 540-megawatt Kennott solar farm in the Northern Cape. How significantly will this kind of project add to the power grid? Well, joining us to answer those kinds of questions is Redge Nkosi, who's the Executive Director at Firstsource Money. Reg, before we even get to that project that was unveiled on Thursday, South Africans have been relieved of Escom's load shedding for a month now. Is it too good to be true?
Well, yeah, well, it's good news for us all to have at least this relief. But, some people are complaining and saying, well, isn't it just about elections and so on, that now we're not having, we're having power throughout. But it's good news nonetheless, and we should welcome that. Whether it's going to be sustainable is another question. I think, in my view, it's not going to be sustainable. Immediately after the election, we should be back into the dark. So any attempt by whether the private sector or government itself is certainly welcome when it comes to increasing generation. I think our challenge now really is about generation.
You know, Reg, Escom has also said they would request 200 billion rand from the private sector to also assist with Escom and its woes of load shedding. But Escom has received from the government bailout after bailout over the years. And now is it expectant to shift that kind of responsibility to the private sector now that it's seen that it's almost bled dry the government's coffers?
Well, firstly, Escom hasn't been receiving bailout. Escom has been receiving money that actually government should have been giving it to Escom almost ever since. Remember, Escom is not necessarily there to be churning out profits for government. It's an institution that is there for public purpose. And public purpose is supposed to be funded by public money. Therefore, should Escom run, assuming it is running its affairs properly, it should continually be funded as such, because some people in the public do not necessarily pay power. Therefore, Escom will not be able to recover from these people. So these so-called bailouts, I think we should begin to move away from the phrase bailout into saying money that should indeed be spent by Escom from the public accordingly, because public infrastructure like power, bridges and so on are public, and therefore need to be funded by the public purse.
I hear what you're saying, Reg. However, sorry to just cut you in there. When it comes to Escom as well, it is no secret that you said earlier as well, assuming that it's run well. We do know that, from years of state capture, that it is not run well and that lots of the money hasn't been spent where it's supposed to be being spent. So government had to give extra. Whereas if Escom was managed well and wasn't under the spotlight of the kind of state capture that it faced, it wouldn't actually need that much more money because it would have spent their money sufficiently.
Absolutely, you're right. In fact, we have had governance challenges at Escom for quite a while. That really should be our focus. If we can focus on ensuring that there's proper governance at Escom, and therefore government giving it whatever money that is supposed to give it, so be it. The idea of bringing in private sector, especially the 200 billion that Lucy mentioned, maybe as much as 400 billion, is in fact an investment in social instability going into the future. Because what that means is that electricity is going to be extraordinarily expensive, to be highly unaffordable by the common person, and that at the end of the day, the government anyway will be forced to foot that particular bill. So the notion that private sector should come in and produce power on behalf of government, while sounding slightly interesting and perhaps good for those who want to go that route, it has proved to be very, very expensive wherever this has taken place the world over. And we know this for a fact. Therefore, given the poverty that we have in this country, that approach should be avoided. Should we have had leadership in this country, they should never have been entertaining that. What they should have been entertaining is to ensure that the 50 gigawatt installed capacity by Escom is in full producing power fully, instead of having to go the variable route which in fact that's the reason why we're having this 200 billion being mentioned. Variable power must be supported at all times with dispatchable power. Unfortunately, we do not have that. So going the 200 billion rand investment through via the private sector is, I'm afraid, as I said, an investment in social upheaval in this country.
Yeah, and just to be clear there, where is that 200 billion rand expected to go exactly?
Well, it's supposed to go into the transmission. There's a company that has now been formed, is the National Transmission Company of South Africa, NTSA. That's where we're supposed to spend this money. But transmission of 14,000 kilometers for power that's never going to reach any person is a complete waste of time. By the way, it's not just that that power won't reach people. We will be paying whether that power is generated or not, like we're doing now. So it's really paying for those who have invested in this 200 billion rand, paying for almost nothing. So our problem today in this country has nothing to do with the grid. It is all to do with generation. And Escom, it's ramped up to 50 gigawatts. Load shedding will be an issue of the past.
One then wonders why even pursue that option. I mean, Eskom's chairperson, Mteto Nyati, has said that the group needs close to 350 billion rand over the next decade to build the country's transmission infrastructure. So even that 200 billion rand won't necessarily assist with that much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it may not even be enough. What we're lacking here is leadership at a central government level. There's absolutely no leadership in Pretoria. That's why we're having all these challenges at Escom. All the notions of the 200 billion coming from the private sector is because the private sector found that the government has no capacity to think, and therefore playing with the government, which thinks it doesn't have money, and therefore bringing in their so-called money. It's not even going to be private sector money anyway, because at the end of the day, it's us who are going to foot that bill.
Sure.
So it can't even be seen as private sector money. It is essentially government money and indeed South African people's money. But it will be money that will be costing. I tell you, perhaps if we want to be a bit poor in our language, we say up to our death.
Sure. We do find ourselves in a very sticky situation. Now, when it comes to, some solar farms that are being unveiled, we also mentioned the one that was unveiled on Thursday this week, 540 megawatts contributing there. I mean, how significant is that, though, considering the demand that we have?
Well, I think any megawatt that is made available into the grid is important. We've been having lots of power cuts in the country, and frankly, that is very, very important, and we should welcome that. But just remember, though, that the window 6 that we've had of about 6 megawatts, only 2.5% enters the grid, which is about 150 or thereabout that enters the grid. Can you imagine, out of the 5,000, we just have about 2.5% entering the grid, but we still have to pay for the difference. So the challenge with this variable power is exactly that. And it will continue forever. That's why Escom, in producing its power, it costed about 44 cents. We are paying, or Escom is buying from these variable power producers, the IPP, at over 232. And who has to pay the 232? It is us. That, again, will obviously welcome that we should be having all these variable power. It is going to be very costly. And like I said, there's no country that has gone this route that has ever had its power bills go down. It's astronomical bills right through every single country.
So, Redge, would you say this route is actually, especially looking at particularly solar, is pumping in a lot of money, and the output that you're getting is not necessarily the result that you require for the demand that we have?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, right now the government has guarantees of over 220 or put it at 280 billion rand guaranteeing for power that we really don't have, and we're not going to have. This is it's not new. Government knows about this. Instead of having to plow all this money into proper generation, remember, this is variable power, like we say. It's power that's going to be available on the basis that, there is sunlight, there is wind, stuff like that. But not all the time are we going to have that.
Yeah.
However, investment in that area was seemingly interesting and very good and supportive. It is investment that should, in fact, be pretty limited. Instead, we should be investing in gas, nuclear, and whichever other dispatchable power that we can energy that we can invest in. I mean, right now, as we speak, India is investing gigawatts in terms of coal. U.S. itself is investing in fossil fuels in gigawatts. South Africa is not. So we are going the wrong direction, because our leadership has chosen a way or a route that is, in our view, highly unsustainable and perhaps just profitable for them and their bodies.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we also have seen our European counterparts also going that direction